We know that federal governments have spent billions of dollars on national security since the 9/11 terror attacks, but you may find the true cost surprising. Joining me is CBC security correspondent Bill Gillespie with a new bottom line based on some CBC News research. And Bill, you really had to dig for these figures, and really, in the end, they turn out to be estimates. But what are the numbers that you've come up with?
Well, it's important to establish, first of all, this is additional tax dollars.
Yep.
The premise was if 9/11 hadn't happened and we continued to spend on security the way we always did at the same levels or with gradual increases, like you might expect, then that would have been one thing. But the figures came out at $24 billion extra dollars we've spent because of 9/11, and that breaks down into two categories. One is we've estimated that at least $9 billion has been spent by the Canadian military because of our mission in Afghanistan.
Okay.
But an additional $15 billion spent on domestic security, and that breaks down in a number of ways. We've increased security at airports, at the borders, and so on. But for example, the budget of CSIS has quietly almost doubled in that period of time. And you can see equivalent increases right over the board. The difficulty in trying to get these figures, and they're not so hard to get, for example, in the UK, which publishes a yearly total of this and is going to start publishing a separate security budget so the taxpayers know exactly how much is being spent. In Canada, they're spread out over a number of different departments, and I'm not sure I got them all.
The RCMP annual budget, you looked at that. That increased as well.
That's a good example of why it's difficult to get an exact figure, because it's increased by almost $1 billion, but how much of that has been for domestic policing and how much has it been to increase their capacity for intelligence and security? We don't really know. Because not only has Canada got a tradition of not revealing to taxpayers things like this, there's a culture of secrecy in intelligence services as well.
So we spent $24 billion to buy more security. What did that buy us in terms of political just politics? What did it buy us in politics?
Well, one of the reasons, of course, there were two reasons we did this. One was to make Canadians safer. So at airports, billions of dollars have been spent on a new screening system, new technology at ports, at borders, and so on. So there's that. But the political element of it is that the U.S. demanded that we do this. The U.S. was traumatized, of course, after 9/11. The U.S. Congress immediately began to pass multi-billion-dollar spending bills to revamp the American security structure. And they demanded, of course, given that we have what used to be called with pride the longest undefended border in the world, then became for the Americans a cause for fear. So they said, well, Canada, you have to do the same. And a lot of this investment really was taken by Canadians and the Canadian governments to protect our trade relationship. Because experts say if we hadn't done that, the Americans would have slowed things down at the border. They just absolutely said, you have to do this.
And it would have been devastating for Canada's economy.
Absolutely. So in one sense, you could look at this $24 billion as both an investment in safety, but also an investment in protecting Canada's trade with the U.S.
Are we spending wisely is the question? Because you can give us a number and tell us how we've spent it. The question is, are we doing it well?
Well, of course, with this much money, bags of money, as one analyst told me, floating around, there's bound to be some waste. For example, we've spent $13 million building security fences to keep terrorists out at ports in the Great Lakes, like Owen Sound and Britt and St. Catharines. I talked to the mayor of Owen Sound. She said, you know, the closest we've ever come to a terrorist event in Owen Sound is when some teenagers tore some flowers out of an ornamental flower pot downtown. So what are we doing with this? On the other hand, it's also very difficult to know. The airport security screening system, for example, obviously this can never be perfect, but some people say it's as much about theater as anything, because so-called intrusion tests show that experts who know the system can probably smuggle a gun or a fake explosive through 1 time out of 5. But the real problem here is we don't know, because the government and the security agents are so tight with the information. They say they can't reveal really the results because it would be like tipping off the terrorists to how effective it is. The public is not allowed to know this either.
But it's good to have the update, and I thank you for coming in and for doing the research. Bill Gillespie joining us here in studio. And you can